Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. Welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, the film and TV podcast from a complete nobody that's hopefully for somebody. I am your host, Kyle Naranya. I am that nobody, and I am back after a short 1 week off. I want to apologize to any of the listeners for the delay. I needed a small break to kind of recharge. Sometimes life can get a little bit overwhelming, and you need a minute just to relax and get excited for what you want to be doing. So I am excited to be back, and there is a lot to talk about in today's episode, where I am going to be releasing my Phase 4 tier list. So that includes everything from WandaVision all the way to Guardians of the Galaxy, the holiday special. I will be reviewing Guardians of the Galaxy, the holiday special. I will be answering mailbags. And that is pretty much it for today. Timecodes will be listed in the description if you would like to hop around. Now, I'm expecting the tier list to take the longest, so why don't we get right into that? This is Kyle Naranya's, mine, official Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 4 tier list. I know there are other podcasters and YouTubers who do a ranking of all of the MCU. Now, one day I may get to do that, but given how dense Phase 4, Phase 5, and even Phase 6 may be, I'm kind of glad that I'm going to be breaking up Phase 4 into its own tier list. Now, I'm going to be going in order of release, so that way you can follow along with me, and an official image of the tier list will get posted after the audio version of the podcast has been uploaded. So you will be able to see it there for a visual representation. Starting Phase 4 off in January to March of 2021 was the MCU's first official television show with WandaVision. I put WandaVision in the rank of A. I think even to this day, it is still one of the best shows that the MCU has put out as a whole. I think diving into Wanda Maximoff's backstory and really giving a bubble story about specifically and literally with what she experiences in the show. I should preface that all of these things are going to have spoilers in them. So if you have not seen one of these pieces of content from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, probably may not be the best part of the episode to listen to. So I'm going to keep going with WandaVision. I think overall, it was an absolute showcase with Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen and what they can do with those characters. The retcon of magic being a big part of Wanda's upbringing, I thought was really well done. The Power Ranger ending didn't necessarily work for me, but overall as a whole, I think it is one of the best parts of the MCU moving forward. And when we get into these other Disney shows, I think that it's currently one of the only things that has mattered to the films. Some of these shows, as of right now, seem to be kind of disposable or extra content just for the sake of having more things to justify your streaming service, and some others aren't. The next would be Falcon and the Winter Soldier, that came out in March of 2021. I think that the show really did suffer from having to cut a significant amount of the pandemic storyline that was going to be a part of it, given the fact that it was obviously released in the peak of a actual pandemic that affected us worldwide. I think that hurts the show's story. I think that the show had a lot of great things to say, specifically with the way that different races are treated in America, and Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson, a Black American, taking over the role of Captain America was certainly something that was interesting. I wish that it had dove into that subject matter deeper. And ultimately, I don't think we had a compelling villain with this. I enjoyed Anthony Mackie and Stan had a great camaraderie between the two of them, and it was fun to see that. But I don't think we had a compelling villain. A lot of this will be set up for eventually Captain America, A New World Order, and Thunderbolts, where we had U.S. Agent played by Wyatt Russell, but I don't think this show ultimately was a success, and that's why I put it in the D category. The next thing is Loki, another show that I think had high expectations. Everybody loves Tom Hiddleston as this character, but I think that character had a phenomenal arc leading through to his eventual death in Infinity War, and that this character just moving forward has not done anything really compelling. I think it was a muddy version of the multiverse where they weren't really sure how they were establishing the rules, and ultimately we were introduced to a Kang that will not be the Kang that we have moving forward. So I also put Loki in a D. Black Widow was our first feature film in July of 2021. It was technically also released on Disney Plus, the only film in the MCU to have this release schedule, given the fact that theaters in some places were closed. I was unable to see the film in theaters, given the fact that theaters were closed currently in Canada. So I was grateful for the fact that it was on Disney Plus. I do think overall that this film hurts from the fact that it came out in the pandemic, as well as the fact that this should have come out prior to the Avengers 3 and 4 with Infinity War and Endgame. I thought it was a compelling story to have more context for Black Widow, but moving forward, we are going to be getting Yelena as Black Widow, likely somewhat in the Thunderbolts, which we know for sure. She does show up eventually in Hawkeye, but this has heavy subject matter with agency being taken away from women, but I think that the fact that the subject matter is not allowed to be more mature hurts the story, and this film I think would have been more successful if it had a limited spectacle but was really a character drama, more akin to something from the Netflix series and maybe more similar to The Winter Soldier. The grand big ship blowing up in the sky, the effects were not overly good, and I think that hurts the film as a whole. So I put it in C. The next was Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which came out in September of 2021. I think that this film was my personal favorite for a significantly long portion of Phase 4. The introduction of Shang-Chi, as well as that world, Simu Liu was fantastic in that role. Awkwafina as his best friend, not romantic love interest, was something that was nice to see them not forced together. The action was really good. That that cable car sequence in San Francisco was amazing. The Mandarin actually getting to be the Mandarin, having Hong Kong style action in the MCU was really cool. And the fact that it was done by people who worked on Jackie Chan's stunt team was awesome. And getting to see a different aspect of the MCU, and obviously you had an actor like Michelle Yeoh in there, was something to behold. Obviously, Tony Leung playing the Mandarin was also quite special. And I think this was cool to see that obviously a lead Asian character as the protagonist. We did have Wong in the Doctor Strange films, but this was the titular character. And as somebody who has a Asian background, this was especially awesome to see. I have Shang-Chi in the category of A. Now, the next thing was What If, which was August 2021. I'm just going to get straight to the point. I think that the show was a missed opportunity, really getting to dive into interesting character stories and getting to see aspects of the Marvel Cinematic Universe that we would never get to see in the films. It could have been a lot better. I think the voice acting was not very good. We got some people stepping into the roles of the Hollywood actors that were not, or the on-camera actors that were not in the film. I put this in F. I thought it was really, really bad. We've had better shows that were trying to do similar things like this, example being the Star Wars shows, and unfortunately a lot of the voice acting for me just felt hollow and the stories were not overly interesting. We got to see very minimal skews on stuff, and unfortunately we got to see a really interesting story with Doctor Strange that ultimately didn't matter to the Multiverse of Madness. We just had to have the layman who didn't read comics or see other films and know what the multiverse was. And a lot of this stuff just feels like it was doing that, explaining things for moving forward. Eternals, which was November 5th of 2021. I thought this film was okay. There are a lot of parts of it I really enjoyed. I love the fact that we got to see an actual wide vistas, which is something we normally don't get to see with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We get to see it shot in places where it is done with green screen, as well as very condensed sets. Given the pandemic, that was not always an option. But I thought that it has an interesting cast, and that we may get to see eventually some sort of elements of this to have to do with space. There was a certain aspect of a hand popping out of the earth that's barely come up, but going more cosmic should be really interesting. And unfortunately, it's left a lot of breadcrumbs that the MCU in the last year has not bothered to touch yet, which is unfortunate. So I have it in the category of C. I think it had a lot of great aspirations, but ultimately didn't didn't manage to meet those things. The next is a television show with Hawkeye, which came out in November and ended in December of 2021. I enjoyed this show a lot. I thought it was fun to see two different Hawkeyes. I thought that the introduction of those characters worked really well. Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye was always fun, getting to see this character who's a little bit over his head and building out his world, getting to see more of his family. Haley Steinfeld as Kate Bishop was fun. It was a faithful adaptation of that run of the comic books, as obviously most notably bringing in Kingpin, which was amazing. Vincent D'Onofrio coming back into the show, and that, for me, puts it in the category of B. The final feature film of that year was Spider-Man No Way Home, which also coincided with Hawkeye, brought back Charlie Cox, which was something I know as a longtime fan of the Netflix show I was certainly happy to see. I enjoyed Spider-Man No Way Home quite a bit in the theater. It is a great theatrical experience. Seeing an audience react to the fact that we have all three Spider-Men in one film was amazing. Pun intended, spectacular. Was it the ultimate Spider-Man movie? I honestly don't think so. I think there's a lot of fun. I think it gives a very compelling arc of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Likely not the end. We probably will be getting a Spider-Man 4, 5, and 6. But as an end cap to this portion of his story, where they've talked about it being the end of his origin, I think it did that well. My problems with the film are that the logic of it does not really hold up, specifically when you go out of your way to explain the magic, but then ultimately that holds it back. I know the pandemic did affect the way that this was shot, because this was supposed to come out after Doctor Strange, and then eventually they switched spots in the release schedule. I think they did the best they could with the circumstances at hand. As a longtime fan of Andrew Garfield, I was really happy to see him as Spider-Man, and him probably have the best arc of the film and maybe the best performance of a Spider-Man in the movie. And I really enjoyed seeing the villains back. It would have been great to get to see other characters from the other Spider-Man's universes, but obviously there was only so much time that they could do with that. So I also put it in the category of B. The next is Moon Knight, which came out in March of this year. I enjoyed Moon Knight a lot. I think that Oscar Isaac as that character was super fun. I think the show decided to get a little big for its britches in terms of two essentially kaijus fighting in Egypt. Ethan Hawke as the villain was super awesome. Getting to see Kalamui as an Egyptian superhero was certainly awesome. More representation in the MCU is a great thing, because we have a very diverse world, and it's awesome to see people represented for themselves on screen. I spoke about that already about Shang-Chi. I enjoyed Moon Knight. I really hope we do get a sequel series, if not get to see him in something else that has to do with the supernatural elements. It does end on a significant cliffhanger. So I also put that in the category of B. The first feature film of this year was Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I put Doctor Strange on the Multiverse of Madness in the category of B as well. I think that this film does a lot of really cool things. At the same time, I think that there was groundwork to be laid with all the multiverse elements that we had earlier in the MCU, and those elements don't really connect outside of the WandaVision thing that I had mentioned earlier. Getting America Chavez in the show was really cool. Her being a mutant, slowly teasing mutants, aka the X-Men, and that expanded world in the MCU has been interesting with the breadcrumbs that they are leaving. But there are elements of this film that I think want to be bigger than they are, and I hope that parts of this moving forward do matter, such as the Illuminati, but I quite frankly don't know if it's going to, as well as the future with Doctor Strange, and significant characters like the Fantastic Four with Reed Richards being played by John Krasinski, which was something I enjoyed quite a bit. So I'm excited for that moving forward. I believe I said it already, but I put it in the category of B. The next thing on the tier list is Miss Marvel, which came out in June of this year. I enjoyed Miss Marvel a lot. I think the marketing didn't do it a lot of favors. I was not necessarily looking forward to it, given the trailers, which seemed to be more YA, but at the end of the day, I thought that Iman Vellani was amazing as that character, and this show was such a refreshing part of the MCU. Getting to see an actually grounded character was fantastic. Her portrayal of Kamala Khan as a true fan of the MCU and Marvel, her love of Captain Marvel, which they do explain to some degree, was super fun. It had its Scott Pilgrim elements. It was similar to the early days of Spider-Man in the MCU. It does resort to her having to fight somebody with similar powers at the end of the day, but I think it really did succeed in what it was trying to do, and also gave us another mutant. So with that, I give Miss Marvel a ranking of A in my MCU Phase 4 tier list. The next was the film Thor: Love and Thunder, which came out in July of this year. I think this improved on a significant amount of issues I had with Thor Ragnarok. Having Thor's relationship with Jane, Natalie Portman coming back to play that character. I think that they handled the cancer storyline quite well with this character. I think the effects are kind of a mess. It looks like it was shot in the volume, which is unfortunate. Christian Bale was very good as Gore, the God Killer. I would have preferred to have less of Korg. This does lean into the humor elements that I feel are okay, but start to draw thin as the film goes on. So there are a lot of strengths in this compared to Thor Ragnarok, and a lot of cons as well. So with that, I still think it may be my favorite Thor film, but I put it in the category of C because there are a lot of kind of thin veiled things that at the end of the day, the film, it's okay. And that's fine, I guess. Category of C. I Am Groot. It was fun. It was cute. It didn't have any lasting impact on me. He's not a baby Groot. He's toddler Groot, technically, if biologically speaking. Not that I know how Groot's species age, but with the things that he's doing, he's a little bit older than a baby. I shouldn't be holding that against the show, but it's a C. It's fine. Nothing really great comes of it, but more Guardian stuff than I know a lot of people loved, and if that's for you, great, but this is my list, so I put it in C. She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. Big fan of this show. If you heard me talk about it in my season review in season 1 episode, I did one specific episode breakdown. I thought this show was fantastic. A legal comedy through and through. August of this year, ending in October on Disney+. Tatiana Maslany absolutely crushed it, getting to see Charlie Cox in a new suit, having more comedic relationship, but I think the depth of that character was still completely relevant, and getting to see the history of the MCU from this perspective and how things are going on. Are the Sokovia Accords still happening? It's good to see things that were such pivotal events with something like Civil War, and seeing what is the status quo post-snap/blip. What is going on with Bruce Banner, and moving forward, I hope that we get to see a lot more of She-Hulk in the MCU. It's rumored she's going to be a part of Captain America New World Order, which would make sense if the leader is going to be a part of it, him being a Hulk villain. I thought this show was fantastic. I thought the meta-ness of it was thoroughly entertaining, and with that, I put it in the category of A. Next was the first special presented by Marvel, which was Werewolf by Night. I did do a review of this. You can check it out in depth. I thought this was awesome. The B-serial nature of it, I think, really works in with the fact that it's shot in black and white, which is fun. It plays up that old movie serial style. It's scary. It is spooky. It introduces officially some supernatural elements into the MCU, which is awesome. Man-Thing being an example of that. I thought that Gabriel Bernal as the werewolf by night was super, super spooky. I hope we get to see more of these elements, maybe teased with something like Blade moving forward would be really cool. I loved it through and through. It's going to be a regular Halloween viewing for me moving forward, which I think is something to be said. And with that, I also put that in the category of A. Black Panther Wakanda Forever, coming out in November of this year, had a significant hurdle to climb with the tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman. And in my review, I talked about how much I enjoyed the film. I think that it handled such a tragic passing of a character and actor with grace and respect. And it tells a really compelling story of multiple people dealing with their grief and how it affects the people around them. The action in this is really great. I thought the introduction of Namor by Tenoch Huerta was awesome. It gives the spectacle you expect from an MCU film, while also at its core being about the characters, which is when I believe the MCU has been the most successful. And because of that, I am putting Black Panther Wakanda Forever in the rank of S. I think it is the best thing we have had from the MCU in Phase 4, and moving forward, I hope to see more things like that. The final piece of this tier list, of course, is Guardians of the Galaxy, the holiday special. I thought that this was a missed opportunity. Getting to see where the Guardians are is something that I was not necessarily looking forward to, but getting to see them, since it has been 3 years since we had seen them in anything as a whole, with their appearance in the Infinity War and Endgame films, briefly in Thor Love and Thunder, but that doesn't really establish exactly what's going on. What could have been a holiday special that really dives into these characters is just a comedy that tries to have its cake and eat it too, with a serious moment at the end of it. And I'm going to get more into that specifically in the review portion, which will be just after I'm done this tier list. So with that, without getting into more specifics, because I want to talk about it in my review, I'm going to put that in the rank of C. So that does it for my tier list. As I said, I'm going to be jumping into a spoiler review of the holiday special right after this. So if you don't want to be spoiled with that, you can jump to the next portion of the podcast. The Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special was directed, of course, by James Gunn and written as well by James Gunn, starring all your favorite Guardians of the Galaxy, as well as Kevin Bacon officially joining the Marvel Cinematic Universe as himself. Now, I'm going to just do spoilers for this. I briefly talked about it in the tier list. I think that this holiday special was a missed opportunity. I think that there is a really great idea at the core of it, where, again, we are in spoilers, which could have been about Mantis's relationship with Peter Quill, given the fact that they both share a father in Ego. Now, it's briefly mentioned in the beginning and the end of it, and that's why she goes on this trip with Drax to bring Peter Kevin Bacon, which he believes will be a great Christmas present, and ultimately it isn't. I think that this film or presentation tries to have his cake and eat it too, with the fact that it has these two, I'd say 1.5 emotional moments, but they do not feel that they are the core of the storytelling. It more felt like an excuse to have Drax and Mantis have this crazy romp in Hollywood while they look for Kevin Bacon. And I think tonally it's inconsistent in that way. It has been something that I have seen as a trend with James Gunn's writing as a whole. I think his most complete and best film to date is still the original Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, it's unknown necessarily how much of that exactly was in place before he took the project. Obviously, we do know that music is a very important element of his storytelling. I think that it lays some interesting groundwork in establishing more of Peter's relationship with Yondu. We do get to see this fun Ralph Bakshi-inspired flashback with his relationship to Christmas, which is a story told by Kraglin. I did enjoy that. We get some neat plot elements that are going to be important, I suspect, moving forward, with Cosmo being introduced, as well as the fact that the Guardians have bought Nowhere. There's a fun cameo where Flula is in it at a bar that Drax and Mantis go to. I also think the characterization of Mantis didn't feel as consistent as it was in Guardians 2 and her appearance in Infinity War. I think the character's tone of voice felt off kilter, where typically she's got this Palm Kletoff Clementeeth. I apologize for messing that up. That she normally has this very high pitch voice, and that it seemed to be dropping in and out. I don't know if that was specifically because the character was getting angry. There are moments where she drops out of it in the other things, but this felt significantly tacked on to fill in elements of Guardians 3, because we will not be seeing the Guardians for at least another year, to just a reminder being like, hey, they exist. We do not really get to see a ton of Chris Pratt in this. I know this was shot around Guardians Volume 3, and I think it suffers from having an inconsistent tone. While the scene between Star-Lord and Mantis is great when she reveals it to him and the meaning behind it, I don't think that it carries as much weight as it hopes to accomplish. And that was why I put it in the rank that I did. If you didn't listen to that portion of the podcast yet, I think there could have been something really special here, no pun intended, but given that it's kind of all over the place, it has a fun two Christmas songs with one with Kevin Bacon at the end. And I think that given the fact that we know that Star-Lord's relationship with pop culture has to do with his relationship with his mom, who he did obviously lose because of Ego, there are certain plot elements I felt that a revisit to some degree would have been really cool, especially seeing flashbacks of potentially Peter Quill watching Footloose with the first time with his mom, maybe in that Ralph Bakshi style, or maybe in a stop motion style. Some other version of a holiday special could have been really fun to play with the different elements of what we're used to with holiday specials. We had the animation, a stop motion thing could have been really cool to help make this feel like something really unique that we are familiar with, like when you're growing up. I know for me personally, I'm watching those stop motion and animated films currently with my kids as we get to the holiday/Christmas season. I can understand why people really enjoyed that end scene, but as a whole, I don't really have much more to say about it. I think it's fine. I think the cinematography is not necessarily great. It doesn't look really good when they are in LA. It's fun to see them with the versions of the characters that are in costumes that you would see in Hollywood, specifically around the Chinese theater, but there are effects that don't seem complete, specifically when Drax and Mantis are jumping as they are chasing Kevin Bacon. I think Kevin Bacon being in it could have also had a heavier weight, given how much we know Peter loves Footloose and what those films mean to him. As I mentioned earlier, I've said this already, and the best way I can describe it is this really did feel like a missed opportunity, and it just feels like more, which is the last thing I want from the MCU at this point. It's been a real heavy criticism of Phase 4 that it seems not incomplete, but seems as if it maybe the whole thing needed another draft. And that's unfortunate because of how much I enjoyed the run of the first 10, 11 years with phases 1, 2, and 3, that the storytelling doesn't necessarily need to be all serious all the time, but what the MCU managed to do so successfully was a balance of tone and having these heartwarming moments as well as being fun at the same time and comical. And I think that this leans so heavily in the comical that it loses what could have made this a really heartwarming, emotional special with Peter and Mantis. And I just don't think it does that. So yeah, that's how I feel about it. I know I'm probably not in the majority about that, but if you haven't watched it yet and you still listen to this portion of the podcast, watch it for yourself and let me know. This is the mailbag portion of the podcast. Now you can get into contact with me on Twitter directly. That's at Kyle_Naranya, or the Film Realist Twitter, or the Film Realist Instagram, or you can email at filmrealistpod@gmail.com. This first question comes from DV Moon, Dan Vogel on Twitter. Thoughts for discussion on the end of Phase 4. I'd love your thoughts at the time on what 5 characters you're excited to see more of, and what 5 characters you're disappointed and or you have little to no interest in seeing more of in phases 5 and 6. So characters that I'm really looking forward to see moving forward specifically would have to be Shang-Chi. I think that introduction into the cinematic universe was really awesome. A aspect that was more spiritual without being supernatural was something I really, really enjoyed. I would love to see something to do with the Eternals moving forward. I really enjoyed getting to see what are they called? My brain is mush right now. The Celestials, there we go. Because that could be a really great tie to Galactus, who, if you don't know, is one of the major villains of the Fantastic Four, and that could certainly be a threat to the MCU as a whole. If we're doing a multiverse thing with Kang, which we know is how Phase 6 ends, Galactus could be a really awesome tease for moving forward. Now, I don't know if we're going to get him in 5 and 6, but something to do with that would be really, really awesome. I can't wait to see more of Miss Marvel. We know Kamala Khan is going to be in Phase 5 with the Marvels, And I'm really looking forward to seeing She-Hulk. I mentioned this briefly in the tier list, that I really hope she is also in Phase 5 with Captain America, The New World Order. So I guess that's 4 or 5. I don't know if I'm counting properly. And let's see, one other thing. Honestly, I would love to see John Krasinski as Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, in the Fantastic Four, which I believe, I'm trying to look this up really quickly, is supposed to be in Phase 6. I thought that the tease of him was really interesting. And yeah, it's in 2025, so that'll be in the beginning of Phase 6, which would be amazing. I would love to see that moving forward. Characters that I do not want to see for a while, I think Thor could take a break just because he is one of the original main Avengers that has not really had one. I think that as well, I'm going to enjoy time away from Doctor Strange. These characters that were a heavy component, although I understand that Doctor Strange was only in Phase 3, getting a lot of that back to back to back would really work with some time away, specifically if things are changing up and if he's leaning more and more into the dark elements. That could be really awesome. I think more new characters is something that I'm looking forward to specifically. I don't need more Loki. I've given my opinion on that show. I honestly think that they needed something to talk about the multiverse with, and they did not have any other characters they wanted to do it with. America Chavez show would have been amazing to really get to see her go through all the different universes, throw her in as another character I'd love to see more of. But I don't need to see any more of Loki. I'm not really looking forward to season 2. I know that Ki Hui Kwan, who was Short Round in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, is going to be in it, which is awesome, and I'm looking forward to that. But I don't need to see any more of Loki. The Guardians, I'm looking forward to seeing the finale of that universe. But if you listen to that portion of the episode, I wasn't a huge fan of the holiday special, so seeing them one more time, I think will be good. They deserve to have a proper trilogy end cap. And I don't know if I've given enough. Hawkeye, I enjoyed that show. Again, you can listen to my tier list to hear where I put it. There's not a ton of stuff. Honestly, more than anything with Phase 4, I think they laid a lot of groundwork that didn't lead to anything. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily. If you tell a really compelling story on its own and it's a limited series and then we don't get to see any more of it, I'm okay with that because that means you told a really great story from beginning to end. But a lot of these things felt like pieces. And when we're just getting pieces, and this is especially frustrating given the fact that we are going to have so much more content with Phase 5 with I don't even know how many films and even more TV than before. That's crazy to me that that's going to be the case. I am really looking forward to more Daredevil. I am not sure if that's in Phase 4. It's listed as Phase 5 on the Wikipedia. Now, obviously, that could change. We're going to get more and more of that. So, again, that's another thing that I'm looking forward to because we got Echo in Hawkeye. We're going to get Daredevil, who was in She-Hulk. There's a lot I'm looking forward to, but there's a lot that they've set up that I really hope does pay off at the end. So I'm critical because we're getting so much stuff, but I don't want the quality of the storytelling to fail because of that, which is unfortunate because the way that they could weave these television shows in with the films could be really exciting and unlike anything we've ever had before. So I hope that's the case. And I don't know if I gave you 5, Dan, but I know for sure I gave you a bunch that I really enjoyed, and I honestly didn't keep count of how much I didn't. So maybe you counted and you can let me know about that. So thank you very much, Dan, for the question. And the second question to end the episode comes from Jermaine611, Jermaine Jones. Thank you for the question. Your top 3 heroes you want James Gunn to bring to the big screen. Now, if you don't know, you may have missed that episode or you've been under a rock, but James Gunn is now one of the co-leads of DC Studios with Peter Seraphine. I would love to see Green Lantern, specifically Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart in the style of like a Lethal Weapon. Now, that is not an original thought. The Green Lanterns are cops, and I would love to see a fun, not comedy, but a fun action adventure with 2 characters, one being a rookie, one being a veteran, Lethal Weapon style. You can switch up who is the veteran and who is the rookie. honestly, that relationship to me does not matter as in terms of who is who, as long as you cast a compelling Hal Jordan and a compelling Jon Stewart. That's something that I would absolutely love to see. There are elements of these things moving forward that I would like. I think it would be really awesome if we do get to see the Batman universe, because I think over 10 years, you really could build up that world. If we get a Robin, maybe eventually you could get a Nightwing, but that would require a significant investment of Robert Pattinson's time. So I don't know if that's going to happen. Clayface is a character I really, really like. It specifically in Batman the Animated Series, he was absolutely incredible. But outside of that, something that I would absolutely love if they could do it. Now, I don't think they're going to, but I would love to see Terry McGinnis on the big screen, aka Batman Beyond. Ben Affleck as an old Bruce Wayne would be awesome. Get to see like a Blade Runner style Batman movie would be incredible. I love Batman Beyond, and Batman Beyond Return of the Joker is one of my favorite Batman stories of all time. I highly recommend you check it out if you have HBO Max. It's all available there for you. And a third, I'm trying to think. I don't want to say Henry Cavill because that feels like a cheat. What DC hero? Honestly, I would love to see a... I don't want to say an obvious answer. Let me think about this, Jermaine, because I want to give you a good answer. We know we're getting more Aquaman. We're getting more Wonder Woman. We're getting a Flash. Cyborg movie would be really cool, although Cyborg would have worked so well in a Flashpoint story. All right. You know what would be cool? Because you could tell like a gritty comic story about conspiracy, which would really touch on things that have gone on in the last 6 years with conspiracy theory, believing, and a lot of that coming undone. I think a Question movie would be really cool. Now, the Question doesn't have to necessarily, you could do the Renee Montoya Question, you could do the Mail Question, doesn't really matter, but I think that kind of web of lies and conspiracy could be a really interesting story if you really got somebody to dive deep into it, especially in the DC universe. Would be really cool. Now, this doesn't mean necessarily I want James Gunn to make these movies, but these are the three characters that I would like to see brought to the big screen in the new DC Studios DCU era. Now, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Jermaine, for your questions. Again, you can tweet at me directly or the Film Realist Twitter page or Instagram page or the email if you would like to reach me. Now, as we get to the end of the year, some of my reviews may be for things that have happened already and that I missed. As an example, next week's episode will be a review of Violent Night, starring David Harbour. And if you would like, I can do a list of my top 10 films of the year. So if you hear this and you would like me to do that, tweet at me and I will start to compile that. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'll see you next time.